an infiltration jug. Okay, so these are about 1 gallon each. And then we have our runoff jug here off the end. These samples are set at about an 8% slope. So in case you're wondering how steep these are. And we'll talk a little bit about the management behind all 3 of these. So the one that's furthest from me is essentially going to simulate an impervious surface. So imagine your concrete driveway. All right. So the one right in the middle is actually from my garden. This is a garden that was converted out of a lawn. And to tell you a little bit of background on that, to convert it out of the lawn, I didn't use any herbicide to kill the lawn. I actually used basically cardboard from the hardware store and blocked out the sunlight on the lawn. Well, if the lawn can't photosynthesize, it dies. Then I added some hay mulch on top of it. So if you've ever heard the term lasagna garden, that's essentially what this is. So it's basically a mulch-based garden, no tillage for the last 3 years. In fact, since it was a lawn before that, it hasn't been tilled for, I don't know, probably 10 or 20 years. So we've grown 2 crops in it, last year and the year before. And then this sample right here comes from a field, a little bit different soil than this one, but it comes from a field that is tilled at least 3 times a year. It's in basically a corn-soybean rotation. And what I did so that we can kind of gauge how much water we're putting on is I got a little rain gauge right here. And we're going to actually fire this thing up for about 4.5 minutes. And we're going to put on about 1 inch of water. So when you think of how much water that is, that's a really, really intense thunderstorm. So think of like a cloudburst. When your windshield wipers are on high speed and you still can't see, that's the kind of rain event we're talking about. All right? We've got a dime here that I use for my prop, and I like to use this on this sample because I want to be able to demonstrate how much soil we actually lose in a very intense rain event. Okay? So what I'm going to do to this sample right here is, if I'm going to prep my garden up, if I've got a fairly hard surface or whatever, what do I usually do? I'm going to break out the rototiller, right? Okay, so I'm going to do some tillage. Okay? And notice I am going on contour, right? I'm not going up and down the slope. Just want to be fair there, you know. We're going on contour. All right, so I'm just going to rough this surface up a little bit. All right. Then I'm going to take this dime and I'm going to just press it right here. Okay, so I can't really see the outside edges, just the top of the surface of the dime. And so that you can kind of see how this works, underneath each of these, this is what the pans look like that they're in. So you got about 150, 200 holes underneath of it. So that's going to allow the water, whatever can get through the 2.5 inches of this sample, is then collected in another pan underneath, and then that goes to the infiltration jug. So everybody see how this kind of works. All right. So we're going to go ahead and fire it up, but now I'm going to have to have you back away a little bit, unless you want to get sprayed.
Water's on. And you can step closer once you know the range you're going to get wet in.
So this tool here really is probably the best tool that we have to demonstrate how water interfaces with the soil depending on the type of management that we're putting on it. So we're going to let that rain gauge fill up to about the 1 inch mark. and the intensity in which this is coming down as far as the water pressure, we have this tuned at about 5 psi to basically simulate the force of a really good-sized raindrop that's coming down at about 20 miles an hour, plus or minus. Okay? So right now, we haven't been going probably a minute, but what are we starting to see? Is there a difference in soil surface management in how water is behaving? Okay? So when I talked about that definition of soil health, one of the key words in that definition is the word function. A soil that does not infiltrate water is a state of soil dysfunction. Soils, healthy soils, are supposed to infiltrate. And already we're beginning to see the difference between a surface, either an impervious surface, the one on your far left, which would be like your driveway, or this surface over here on the right, which would be like a garden, your typical garden. That's what we're getting in an intense rain event. So think about that initial raindrop impact. That initial raindrop impact is actually where we get the greatest level of compaction on bare soil.
We're 2 minutes into the thunderstorm at this point.
Okay. So we've almost got, let's see here. You can see it really good there. Tell me when we get to an inch. So already right now, I can see the outside edges of the dime. I pressed that dime in on purpose because I wanted to be able to see relatively how much soil are we losing in this example. And I've got some numbers I can share with you on that. But the thing about this is, folks, is that we don't have to put up with this, what's happening on the right. That can be changed. Soils that are unhealthy can actually be reversed and pushed the other direction with good management. Whether that's your lawn, whether that's your garden, those all can be improved. But it takes a rethinking of how it needs to be managed. And it also takes a rethinking of what a healthy landscape should look like. Now, I got to tell you, we wanted to have 2 lawn examples on this simulator. But given the weather, that was a little bit of an impossibility. Because in order to run 2 lawn examples, I wanted to have 2 different managements right next to each other, adjoining property owners. And I didn't have the gumption to ask my landlord to dig up their lawn that they mow twice a week, all throughout the summer. I mow my lawn about once a week to every week and a half to their 2 to 3 times in the same time period. On their lawn, they don't pick up clippings. They mow it so frequently that there's hardly any clippings there. I mean, it's almost like a putting green. But you think about it, when you look at golf landscapes, when you look at a lot of people's yards, people want that really short putting green. Perfect, thank you. So, but you think about it, that's what we grew up with, right? I mean, I grew up, being with my grandparents, my parents on their place. You mow your you mow it, you get it nice and short. It looks really, really nice. You could go out there and play croquet really easily. But the thing is that is actually that is a type of a management that is opposed to being able to infiltrate water.
Speaking of infiltration, we've got some really nice infiltration going on in the middle bucket here.
Okay, all right. So let me bring these out.
We've got about 7 minutes here,
Okay.
Justin.
We are on a time deadline here. Okay, so we're looking at runoff versus infiltration. Okay, so if this doesn't wake you up, I don't know what will, because I wish I would have seen a demonstration like this 20 years ago, because it would have totally changed the way that I look at the ecosystem. But where we're not disturbing the soil, where we're keeping the soil covered, we're integrating diversity into the garden landscape with a diverse mixture of different plants. Those are three of the great keys to actually getting the soil to actually start reversing and start to re-aggregate so that it can allow water to infiltrate. If your soil can't infiltrate, then your soil can't hold water, because you've got to be able to infiltrate the water first before you can start to hold it. Okay? So here in the garden plot, 2 year, it was turf forever as far as I know before that, but the last 2 years, no-till, lasagna mulch type garden right here. Here where we've been doing a lot of tillage. Now everybody come up here closer.
Water's turned off, don't worry.
Look at this, look at this dime. The dime is now pedestaling. It's sitting above everything else around it, and it was actually sunk in before we started the demonstration. So when we put down an inch of water in about 4.5 minutes. What did we lose there? So I did the calculations. How much soil do you lose with a dime's thickness being gone? A dime's thickness is roughly 8.8 ton per acre. That's equivalent to 8 cubic yards. Okay, so you look at a dump truck, that's about 80% of a dump truck's weighted capacity, 8 cubic yards. If the dump truck's a 10 cubic yard dump truck. Okay, so we're losing, and that was just one rain event. That was one cloudburst. I remember at least 2 times last year we had some very intense cloudbursts. I want my soil to infiltrate as much as possible, not to run off. Because with the soil, not only am I losing soil, but I'm losing the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium that was tied up with those soil particles. So very important to realize that whether we're talking about a tilled up garden or we've got some pictures here, and let's go ahead and show those. Okay. When we start talking about a lawn landscape, how much you clip above ground determines your rooting depth. Okay? So the shorter you mow the lawn all the time, my mower at home, I put it all the way up at the highest it'll go. It's as high as it can physically go. Interestingly enough, when I look around the neighborhood, I've got the greenest grass. But I don't have that really tight, manicured appearance that most people really like. But here, just realize what you do above influences what goes on below, and it's the roots that actually feed the soil life. So when we talk about feeding soil biology, the soil biology feed at the root of the plant that help to make those glue-like compounds that help soils to start aggregating so that soils will start to infiltrate so that they can hold more water. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pass this around, and along with this one right here.
What species of grass? I'm not sure. Do you know offhand?
I do not know offhand.
But the same concepts are going to hold true for different species. It may be a different growth pattern, but the more above ground green, the more energy it has to build a better root system.
Yep. Okay, so here's another rainfall simulator demonstration that was done. Okay, so this is actually looking at 3 different samples. And these are from a pasture situation, but it's 3 different types of grazing management. Now you may ask yourself, well, what in the world does grazing management have to do with my lawn? Well, the one here on, which would be on your left, the one that's clipped the lowest, okay, that's basically a continuous grazed pasture. That's representative of most people's lawns. You think about, a 15, 20 horse mower, maybe a 25 horse mower, and it's heavy, and if you've got hills, maybe you've got the tires weighted a little bit so it stays on the hills without tipping over. Okay, I live in the driftless area. There's a lot of people that mow lawns on steep landscapes. Okay, So the one on, which would be on your far left, would be representative of, you know, clipping it down to that Gulf green height. But when you look at the middle and then the far right example, the more residual you start leaving, the more water you start infiltrating and the less that runs off. Most people think that a lawn, you know, well, you know, it's a permanent cover crop. It's perennial, it's green and growing. It should be the epitome of soil health. It's usually the epitome of unsoil health. Okay? It's soil that's not functioning because of how the surface is being managed. So I just want you guys to at least take away here is that what we do on the soil surface impacts what goes on underneath. And when we talk about trying to keep nutrients out of the lakes, whether that's through runoff or through stuff that is actually infiltrated and like nitrogen-based fertilizers, they follow water. So if that nitrogen-based fertilizer is following water and ending up out in the lake, which soil or which type of management is going to help to retain the nutrients and keep them there and not leak them out? And that all has to do with your management, how you manage that lawn landscape. So it's a rethinking of what healthy should look like.